Hey everyone. So, real quick, we haven't talked about this a lot on this channel because they just don't really come up that often. But there are these entities that exist in the world that are sort of digital ways to engage in some sort of therapy. There's BetterHelp, which I know has had some critiques. There are, specialty text-based hotlines for suicide and all sorts of stuff. By the way, trigger warning, suicide. We haven't really talked about that stuff much because it doesn't seem to come up that often. And then one of our the members of our Discord shared this with us, and it felt like this was kind of in our wheelhouse. So, with that said, let's get started. Suicide Hotline shares data with for-profit spinoff, raising ethical questions. So, let's get into it and see what is going on.
Crisis Text Line is one of the world's most prominent mental health support lines, a tech-driven nonprofit that uses big data and artificial intelligence to help people cope with traumas such as self-harm, emotional abuse, and thoughts of suicide. But the data the charity collects from its online text conversations with people in their darkest moments does not end there. The organization's for-profit spin-off uses a sliced and repackaged version of that information to create and market customer service software.
So I guess you guys can already see where this becomes a really ethical milieu, namely that for us as mental health conscious individuals, especially those of us who are actually looking to be, are mental health professionals, this is horrifying because we have the intersection between tried and true codes of ethics around the behaviors of clinicians and the ways in which privacy and confidentiality should be kept. And it's understood that when you call a suicide hotline or whatever, theoretically, your information should be protected. That just goes without saying. But it seems like someone's found a way out around this. And when the age of Google or every bit of interaction you have on the internet is being cataloged and used as a way to sell you things, to know that someone in their darkest hour is really terrifying. So let's go through and see how the hell they're doing this. And yeah.
Crisis Text Line says any data it shares with that company, Loris.ai, has been wholly anonymized, stripped of any details that could be used to identify people who contacted the helpline in distress. Both entities say their goal is to improve the world in Loris' case, by making customer support more human, empathetic, and scalable. In turn, Loris has pledged to share some of its revenue with Crisis Text Line. The nonprofit also holds an ownership stake in the company, and the two entities shared the same CEO for at least a year and a half. The two call their relationship a model for how commercial enterprises can help charitable endeavors thrive.
I mean, my argument would be this is an example of how business and capital can utterly pervert a good idea. Jesus Christ. Okay. So we can get into a whole progressive kind of take on this, but the idea is that, well, yes, charities need money. That's a thing. As long as we exist in the model we're in or some variation that in, you need money.
Yeah, the nonprofits and, they still have to pay people to do the work, right?
Well, exactly. Like, you have to do this. But this is the problem is that by definition, by doing it this way, what you've essentially done is sold out these people's data. And the issue is you can make it anonymous all you want, but you're still taking people at their absolute lowest and selling it, right? And so this is like the website of the company Loris AI, and how its software uses an artificial intelligence to help customer service agents interact with consumers online, which I could see if you're doing like a text online thing is useful. But again, that AI could be fed by human interaction, by people using their various softwares and not for profit. So that feels really weird.
So I'm wondering if they're going to tell us how some of that data gets used. In a lot of cases, the data from these things gets used, to make more money. That's the point, right? That's the point of selling it, is somebody else can now use this data to make more money. And so I'm hoping this article, as we go through, will give us a bit more information, because if you are getting like marketing data, which is one of the big things, out of this group of individuals, and now you are like, okay, well now we can, target ads and stuff at this group better. You are taking advantage of people, dealing with mental illness. You just are. So let's keep going.
Yeah, let's keep going.
For Crisis Text Line, an organization with financial backing from some of Silicon Valley's biggest players, its control of what it has called the largest mental health data set in the world highlights new dimensions of the tech privacy debates roiling Washington. Giant companies like Facebook and Google have built great fortunes based on masses of deeply personal data. But information of equal or greater sensitivity is also in the hands of nonprofit groups that fall outside federal regulations on commercial businesses with little outside control over where that data ends up.
Wow.
Ethics and privacy experts contacted by Politico saw several potential problems with the arrangement.
You think?
Some noted that studies of other types of anonymized datasets have shown that it can sometimes be easy to trace the records back to specific individuals, citing past examples involving health records, genetics data, and even passengers in New York City taxis.
Shit.
Wow. Okay. I want to see. Let's see if that's continued, because that's
others questioned whether the people who text their pleas for help are actually consenting to having their data shared. Despite the approximately 50-paragraph disclosure, the helpline offers a link to when individuals first reach out. The nonprofit may have legal consent, but do they have actual meaningful, emotional, fully understood consent? Asked
No.
Jennifer King, the Privacy and Data Policy Fellow at the Stanford University Institute for Human-Centered Artificial Intelligence.
I mean, I would say no. Based on this, just again, consent is a very important thing, and we'll talk about this more later tonight, but again, consent is something incredibly powerful. The idea that a person is, clicking a button for a term of agreement, we've all seen those jokes about, like, you click the Apple terms of service and then they come and steal your heart. Like, this is an issue with this, is that they can bury things in there that are problematic. And as Lil just said in chat, yeah, if you're feeling bad enough, if you're feeling shitty, you're not going to read that. You're going, like, again, there's a level of coercion. You're offering help, but they have to go through this 50-paragraph thing. Like, hey, I need you to read this length of a small novella. Like, said by Jennifer King, Privacy and Data Policy Fellow at Stanford University. These are people at their worst moments. Using that data to help other people is one thing, but commercializing it just seems like a real ethical line for a nonprofit to cross. Fucking agreed. Keep going.
Those disclosure terms also note that Meta's Facebook Messenger and WhatsApp services can access the content of conversations taking place through those platforms.
Whoa.
Before
Yeah,
this
of course they
article
can.
was published, Meta confirmed that it has access to that data but says it does not use any of it,
Bullshit.
except for cases involving risk of imminent harm. After
Whatever they
publication,
consider to be
WhatsApp
imminent
clarified
harm.
that it and Meta have no access to the contents of messages occurring via WhatsApp. Former federal regulator Jessica Rich said she thought it would be problematic for third-party companies to have access even to anonymized data, though she cautioned that she was unfamiliar with the companies involved.
We're going to do more analysis in a minute, but I want to get through as much of this as possible because I think this is important.
It would be contrary to what the expectations are when distressed consumers are reaching out to this nonprofit, said Rich, a former director of the Federal Trade Commission's Bureau of Consumer Protection. She later added, the fact that the data is transferred to a for-profit company makes this much more troubling and could give the FTC an angle for asserting jurisdiction. The nonprofit's vice president and general counsel, Sean Rodriguez, said in an email to Politico that Crisis Text Line obtains informed consent from each of its texters and that the organization's data sharing practices are clearly stated in the terms of service and privacy policy, to which all texters consent in order to be paired with a volunteer crisis counselor.
That is not how informed consent works. Hold on. One sec.
The thing to note here as well is that I think they are blending, hey, come sign our terms of service, right? Like when you do a Windows install, you have to click through all of, terms and agreements. The problem is that in the counseling world, no, you actually have to do consent and actually have to do stuff that Jess will talk about.
Yeah, real quick. So informed consent, I'm going to go with the AMAs because it's the quickest one I found. Informed consent to medical treatment is fundamental to both ethics and law. Patients have the right to receive information and ask questions about the recommended treatments so they can make well-considered decisions about care. Successful communication in the patient-physician relationship fosters trust and supports shared decision-making. The process of informed consent occurs when communication between a patient and physician results in the patient's authorization or agreement to undergo specific medical intervention. In seeking a patient's informed consent or the consent of the patient's surrogate if the patient is unable to make blah, 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 physicians should A, assess the patient's ability to understand relevant medical information and the implications of treatment alternatives to make an independent and voluntary decision. I would say that would also include the ability to understand what's being done in that treatment specifically and what also is happening there. B, present relevant information accurately and sensitively in keeping with the patient's preferences for receiving medical information. The physician should include information about the diagnosis, the nature and purpose of the recommended interventions, the burden, risk, and expected benefits of all options, including foregoing treatment. C, document the informed consent conversation and the patient or surrogate's decision in the medical records in some manner. When the patient/surrogate has provided specific written consent, the consent form should be included in the record. So again, the problem with this is that, by definition, to me, this is not informed consent. While I absolutely support terms of service, using a terms of service in this way to get a false form of consent is really gross, because what it essentially asserts is this person who is in the dire straits, they're absolutely struggling, is not going to read these 50 paragraphs, and you're saying that this person has to make this very deep decision under duress, or otherwise they don't get the help, which tells me that this is coercive. You're offering help, but there's a catch. There's a little tiny little, thing, and that is you have to give this up. The way you would handle this, if this really was somehow ethical, would be is you would have an alert saying, please understand that if you engage in this, we do have the right to sell your data after it's been made anonymized or whatever the term is. But even then, there's not even that attempt. You're just burying it in 50 paragraphs of nonsense. So I need you guys to understand this. This is insanity.
So Vogerbitz asked, would this be considered medical intervention?
Yeah. They said themselves, they have crisis counselors. I don't know what the crisis counselor in this particular case is,
counselor, to my understanding, is not a legally protected terms with, correct me if I'm wrong, right? It's not a
crisis counselor is not licensed. Professional counselor is.
Right. And so what that could mean is a, its own thing. So social worker, you have is and a few of these other words are also very protected terms and mean
so if these are
specific
proper
things, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So if these are proper crisis counselors in the traditional sense, here's what they would look like. This is on healthcaredegree.com. It says, crisis counselors have typically earned a master's in counseling. So they literally have my degree. There are various options when it comes to degree types, and counselors may earn a master's in arts, MA, which is what I have, a master's in science, MS, or an MS in professional counseling. There are a few programs across the country that specialized degree in crisis and trauma counseling, and they have their own American Institute of Healthcare, and which means if they are counselors, they would go under the ACA Code of Ethics. Give me 1 second.
I think this is one of those cases where counselors is being used in a general sense and not.
If they're doing actual mental health work, they have to be
No. I super agree with you. There's a big if there, right? There are some really fucky ways that places get around some of this stuff, and that's what I'm pointing at. Is that fucky things happen?
Sorry, I'm looking for something. Duplicate submissions, replication. That's confidence for that. Yeah, so here's the thing. If you're a person who's calling at your worst time, everything is terrible, yada yada, this is the ACA Code of Ethics 2014. I've gone over this on stream like a year ago. And I want you to notice Section C, subsection 7, Part C. Harmful practices. Counselors do not use techniques, procedures, modalities which when substantial evidence suggests harm, even if such services are requested. So this is why you never do conversion therapy. Even if someone asks, they can go fuck themselves because it's bad. So here's the thing. Breaking confidentiality is by its nature a harm. Also, if they are actually bound under this, there are concerns in here. I have to figure out where. Media presentations, reporting to third parties.
You know, do we want to grab somebody in chat to look up what the actual credentialing of people on this are? Because that might answer a little question.
Yeah, someone in chat that wants to grab that, but if they are crisis counselors in the traditional sense, they are bound by this. And again, what I'm trying to point out here is there are rules in here specifically about, let me give an example. Let's say I work for a crisis clinic and I work with this client and the client really wants to see me at my private practice, right? I actually can't suggest that because technically that is a conflict of interest. Do you understand? It's the same reason why if you're a school counselor, you can't tell a kid you're seeing there to see you in your private practice because it's a conflict of interest. You're trying to essentially remonetize or monetize a situation that may be already being covered in some way. It's not great. Anyway, let's get back to this and we can talk more about it at the end.
Yeah.
In an earlier exchange, he emphasized that Crisis Text Line's relationship with its for-profit subsidiary is ethically sound.
Bullshit.
We view the relationship with Loris.ai as a valuable way to put more empathy into the world, while rigorously upholding our commitment to protecting the safety and anonymity of our texters, Rodriguez wrote. He added that sensitive data from conversations is not commercialized, full stop. Loris CEO since 2019, Eddie Hertz, wrote in an email to Politico that Loris has maintained a necessary and important church and state boundary between its business interests and Crisis Text Line. After Politico began asking questions about its relationship with Loris, the nonprofit changed wording on its website to emphasize that Loris does not have open-ended access to our data, it has limited contractual rights to periodically ask us for certain anonymized data.
Sure,
Rodriguez
Jan.
said such sharing may happen every few months.
So it's a little weird they had to suddenly add that in. Kind of feels scummy. So this seems to go into how how this got created. Crisis Line says exchange 200. See, it goes into it. This just goes into why these algorithms are problematic or why these types of things. This is how search engines connect things together. Okay, so this just goes into, again, the way their sort of AI, way their algorithm works. And this goes into this. Let's get into the actual shit that matters here.
Former crisis text line volunteer Tim Ryerson has a different term for Laura's use of the crisis line's data: disrespectful.
True.
When you're in conversation with someone, and you don't know how it's going to end, it's a very delicate and tender and fragile space, said Ryerson, who has started a public campaign to try to change the nonprofit's data practices. He said the people who contact the text line, many of them teens or younger, include somebody staring at blades on their table in front of them, or somebody hiding from a parent who's on a rampage, or someone who's struggling with an eating disorder, somebody who's ready to end their life.
No, that's based. This person's fucking great. Tim Ryerson.
Yeah, so yeah.
In his experience as a volunteer, he said he believed those individuals definitely have an expectation that the conversation is between just the two people that are talking. Ryerson said the organization terminated him in August after he began raising concerns internally about its handling of data. Rodriguez, the crisis text line general counsel, disputed this, saying Ryerson was dismissed from the volunteer community because he violated code of conduct. Despite repeated requests, Rodriguez declined to specify what the alleged violations were.
Wow.
I absolutely did not ever violate the code of conduct, not even close, and they know that, Ryerson said. There is a process that is followed for code of conduct violations and it was never invoked. The organization encourages volunteers and staff to use their internal system for expressing any concerns, and that's what I did.
So this guy spoke up about the concerns, and they were like, nah. That line, though, mental health and people cutting themselves adapted to customer service. That sounds ridiculous. Wow.
No, it super does.
So again, this is that the creation of them to phase out the practice. Yeah, change.org petition, which will probably not go anywhere, but data from our conversations being used. Mental health. Yeah. This apparently the volunteers didn't even fucking know.
Used for customer service.
She's referring. She's.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah, she's just referring to what's going on. People at their worst moments. Data ethics experts. Let's go into that one. This is probably useful.
Data ethics experts contacted about the nonprofit helpline, its for-profit spin-off, and their data sharing practices said the setup raised various possible issues. One is the issue of whether the data being shared is truly anonymous, despite Rodriguez's assurance that sharing personally identifiable information is strictly forbidden under the contracts between Crisis Text Line and Laura's. The repersonalization of data is perhaps esoteric but not completely beyond the means of some nefarious operator, said health tech expert John Nosta, founder of the think tank Nosta Lab. Rich, the former FTC consumer protection chief, agreed. Anonymizing the data could decrease the likelihood of harm, but we don't know whether that could be reverse engineered, she said.
And the people at the beginning said that it probably could be.
And cited data lots of ways as ever before.
Right here. And should someone manage to track that data back to a specific individual, the people who sought the help from could find their what is that
autonomy?
Word? Thank you. I couldn't speak today. Autonomy and choices compromised, said Eric the Chief Science and Digital Officer at Duke Clinical Research Institute. This is what I was getting to. If that were to happen with the crisis text line data, your name could be associated with a suicide hotline, he said, noting how disclosures about a person's HIV status in the 1980s or involvement with Planned Parenthood today could put a person at risk. It's a lot different than somebody just understanding your cholesterol. Wow. Because again, if you have a job in a at-will state that finds out that you've gone to like Planned Parenthood or whatnot and they're conservative, they can just fire you. So if you contact this, they can go, oh, you're not mentally well. Boom. Couple things in chat. Vogerbert says that they used to work for this place and didn't know this was happening.
This place or another
place? This place. And we have another person in chat, in YouTube chat saying, Max Kamowski I used to be a social worker at CTL. It was really bad. And this was a small part of it. The Teen Vogue article from last year was a really good summary. Good to know. I mean,
you've got a link, we'll take it.
Yeah, sure. Fogelbert said here, they even trained us to reassure people the conversation was confidential. Whole thing seems sketchy. What I'm trying to say is folks texting people in crisis weren't clinicians. Many of them hadn't even a bachelor's degree. So here's the thing. I got to say something. I know people are going to be pissy about this because leftists hate fucking elitism. Licensure and education have a purpose. While they are not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, they are not perfect. They are means by which to weed out idiots. The likelihood, and that's what we're playing in, is likelihoods. The likelihood of me fucking up a client is significantly less than someone coming in with an associate's. That is not to say that education's the end-all be-all, but when you're specifically dealing with these things, if the people around you are practicing crisis counseling, like we just looked, a traditional crisis counselor should have a master's degree. They should have the same level of freaking degree I do. If there are legitimately people walking around that don't even have a college degree or don't even have a bachelor's, by definition, this is toxic. This is absolutely toxic. And this honestly, my honest take is this place should be shut down because what they're calling crisis counselors, while not a protected term, are offering mental health counseling. And guess what? They're offering that without licensure.
This is what I was getting at with the protected terms, which things are not. And it's hard for people who aren't in this field already to know which words are which and what exactly they mean, because how the fuck would you know? And this could vary by state. You wouldn't know.
And Fogelbert says, I firmly agree. I should not have been doing what I was doing at that stage of my career. I agree. Not because I don't think you're competent. I assume you are. The reason why I think you shouldn't have been doing that is because you didn't have the accurate clinical training to be able to do this. And it doesn't just put the person you're talking to at risk. It puts you at risk. Noom does this with their goal coaches too. Not one of them is a certified dietitian. That's fucking gross. Max says the counselors are volunteers and they were supervised by licensed mental health professionals. Eventually, they stopped requiring a master's in a relevant field because of the reporting requirements. Yeah, because if someone's a teen and they call in, you have to do a CPS report. It requires it.
Well, you absolutely need to know what the fuck you're doing, right? Like, you need to know when you're a counselor, you've got to know which things you're reporting, right?
Guys, okay, so I need to make it really clear. So at my university, when I was training in counseling, I had to go through a clinical portion of my master's program. What that means is you're not just learning the theories, you're doing counseling. We were doing it at the school's counseling center, and we had the one-way glass stuff so that our cohort, as well as our supervisors, could watch our sessions. You feel me? And so what happened is that my stuff through over a year and a half of clinical work. Oh, thank you, Spenny the Spoon. Appreciate that. That's amazing. With the incredible generous $5. Thank you. So I'll give you an example. In my school, there were 3 classes. One of them was the basics of counseling. One of them was basically a sort of skills class, and one of them was actual clinical work. In all of these, you were either doing practice sessions, you were doing sessions with your cohort mates, right? You're the other people training. And then you were also doing it with the public. They didn't want you to walk out the door being shitty. I know that seems like a lot. I know that really sucks. But I really want people to understand this is why these barriers exist, because you don't have people in this situation. Vogerbitz and psychosocialism should have never been in that situation.
No, I mean, don't get me wrong. I had a job working at a youth center that I was figured out a few months in. Wait a minute, what are we doing? Why is it that every time I do the callbacks on these surveys, no one's telling me good things? And it was definitely hey, I know they're selling it as professional, and there's training and stuff, but midway through, it was kind of wait a minute, this is not great. I should have had better training. This is not a good situation.
Tiamat. Max says part of the reason why a master stopped being a requirement was that people working for CTL were speaking up about ethical violence. Yeah, I saw that already. I already read that out loud, Tiamat. Yeah, and one of the ethical violations and unethical practices would have been if you're dealing with an abuse situation, say you have a queer kid calling and their parents are beating them, you are legally required if you're a licensed practitioner, you are compelled by law to, report. You're a mandated reporter. And yes, everything is sent through the site. Everything is through YouTube. They're all one stream together. And we're not on Twitch because Twitch's TOS is stupid. So what that takes from this is that, again, I know people don't like requirements. I know they feel like there's ways that people could do this. I'm being very, very clear when I say that is just not okay. Now, the way you fix this is you make those programs, specifically like my master's program, you make that subsidized by the government. You have decent oversight to make sure it continues putting out quality counselors, and you make it accessible as hell so that the people who want to do it can do it. And here's the thing. You can then have a system like this that uses digital counseling like this in a way that's beneficial and a way that's legal, and then on top of it, the most important thing, ethical. But this company is being shady as fuck. All right? Like, are we getting this? Like, see how much more we got of this. See here.
Asked how Texture's data is scrubbed to ensure anonymity, Rodriguez from Crisis Text Line said it's done via an automated process that removes information including names, phone numbers, and social media handles. This is done in order to strongly and responsibly reinforce that anonymized data cannot reveal the identity of a texter, he said. But King, the Stanford fellow, called it ethically questionable to make commercial use of this kind of data even if it's anonymized given the emotional stress that people are under when presented with a link to terms of service they may never open. By texting further with us, you agree to our terms, says the automated first message. We are seeing more and more how often data online is not just my shopping history, it's a real glimpse into my psyche, King said. These are people at their worst moments. Using that data to help other people is one thing, but commercializing it just seems like a real ethical line for a nonprofit to cross.
So, again, one of the things I want to make really clear here is if we take your data of all the places you go, all we're getting is data points. And if you want to paint somebody, by the way, Vogerbitz, thank you so much for the $10 super chat. Deeply appreciated. Vogerbitz said, thank you for bringing this to light. Love you both. I'll be steering people away from this from now on. Awesome. Really appreciate that.
Spending the Spoon also said, hello, I discovered you two a few days ago, and I love your channel and work. You're the best, and I recommend you two to my friend. Solidarity forever. Thank you.
Aw, love you. The issue here is that if I take your data online and I look at it in a particular light, I can frame it in some really negative ways. Let me be really clear. If someone looked at my digital history, they're going to see me shitposting on Twitter, talking to you guys, looking for silly PNGs to make, stuff, and probably some furry porn. Like, can we be clear here? Like,
let me tell you how often I've got to research awful things, or I don't always know what I'm getting into, because there's like some question or some comment about stuff. Like
I am a deviant and a degenerate. Don't get it twisted. But the thing is that you could take that stuff to frame me in a very, very negative light. Should that be the need, you can get an incredible picture of a person.
Well,
than just their shopping history.
And I think so. I was thinking, usually, like, if you are. They say they're collecting data, okay, and they're probably going to make interpretations about what that data means and all of that. And in a, scientific research study setting, okay, you've got checks and balances, you've got a research study, you've got, ethical considerations and boards and all this stuff has to go through, and then, peer reviewing and all of that, all right? And so there's stuff set up around there to protect people, but also, like, actually use this data in an effective way that will actually, like, hopefully, better places. There are obviously some issues occasionally. But by and large, you do need to do research to do mental health stuff. But in this case, with a company like this, they don't have to do any of that. They don't have to research any of it properly. They can come to whatever conclusions they want, sell it however they want, and just go from there.
So this is as of 2016. Crisis Line gets 23.8 million from tech A-listers, including the Melinda Gates Foundation. Yeah. Remember, the Gateses were the ones that, screwed up charter schools in Washington. You can go see that episode of, the Patriot Act. Great show. Yeah, I mean, like, this looks really sus. And apparently there have been attempts to try to use legislation to close whatever illegal or ethical gaps allowing for this. Because they're nonprofit, they can do sort of what they want. And to me, this falls into the same issue as, like, churches and being able to do this. Like, there are churches where their priests can call themselves religious counselors, but these people have no training beyond being able to read a book. Okay, so I feel like we got into pretty much what we need to go over. Here's the thoughts. I am not against digital means of mental health. You have to take every step possible to make it safe. When I talk to a client over video, it is through an app that is incredibly encrypted, and we ask them to use that one specifically. The goal of this is to understand how we can use technology to better serve people. I haven't seen clients in person in over 2 years because there's a pandemic. But the fact that people are using these kinds of apps to make money off of them, to me suggests that to some degree, there are now aspects of capital, there are aspects of corporations trying to find ways to monetize that while we're forced to be at home for those who can be at home. That's really fucking scummy. Let me be clear. The fact that this exists and that people are taking advantage of this is insane. Max, I didn't see you get the link. I didn't see it go through here. The founder and CIO was fired by the board last year. Yeah, we might have to check that out on another stream. I want to finish up this segment, but I just want to make it really clear to everybody who's watching. This is really fucked. And if you're using these services, I know it's hard, but try to do a little bit of research beforehand. If you're a person that struggles with mental illness like I do, I'm a person with borderline, suicidal ideations are a thing. I strongly recommend going through and trying to research some of the places you would call if things get bad. And it might be something me and Zena need to go over one of these days in a future episode, future segment of what ones seem to be the best. So yeah, I think that's really important. Yeah. So I don't really have anything else on this other one, just to say this is really gross and that we need to close these loopholes. And also, yeah, do your research, please. I did see Tiamat that there was a mention of the Teen Vogue article. I've now seen that several times and I've responded to it. I don't have it right now and we are going to end the segment. So if someone wants to put that in links for stream on our Discord, we will be more than happy to look at it. Is there anything else you wanted to add?
Just in general, your local techie here going, your privacy online matters. Okay? It absolutely matters. Using websites and services that are going to value your privacy like DuckDuckGo, the Valdi browser, I want to say Cloudflare has a public DNS that's...
VPNs are good.
VPNs, a different DNS than what your internet service provider, that's another issue, but there are a lot of ways to protect your privacy, and there are a lot of really rough things that are going to be coming, that are already coming through that target people, okay, with advertisements, with, whatever mind state you're in. Like, that's a thing that goes on in the digital world by large companies. So maybe we'll try and get some more stuff on there, but...
Yeah, we'll be willing to set up links. I'm glad coming back to this, but we do have other things we got to cover tonight, so I'm going to end this segment here. We'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.
Bye.
If you like this video, please like, comment, and subscribe. Also, consider donating to us. You can support us on our website, transgirltherapist.org. You can also help us on our Patreon, link below, or you can become a member here on YouTube. Thank you so much for watching.